hop artists and entrepreneurs. And somebody's standing outside the office there. I think is our guest here. Jenny is going to go and see. I think she's here. Oh, very good. Very good. All right. Excellent. Jenny will get her set up. So if you are just joining us, yes, Marianne Williamson is here. She is in the studio and we're going to get to talk to her. So wonderful. I'll let you figure that out, Jenny, if you would. So this is great. So if you have any questions or anything at all, the chat room is open. The studio line is open, but let me get that mic up there and we'll dive right in. Oh, Jenny's going to help her get adjusted there. Very good. I'm going to actually move this camera over a little bit too, because we're also online. Marianne Williamson is here and I've got your mic up. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Sorry about that. There we go. Okay. I can hear you. Now. Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's wonderful to meet you. This is the first time we've met.
Thank you.
I've obviously been aware of you for a long time because you're running for president, of course, in 2020, and you sound out of breath. Were you running to get up here?
I'm sorry that we're late. Yeah, we were sort of running. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. No, it's like I was saying.
That's okay.
I know that when you're probably doing a lot of appearances. We are the first in the nation primary in theory.
Well, the DNC cannot strip you of your significance.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about today, actually. Yeah. And also, too, before we really get going on that, and I want to talk to you about issues, too, but I also want to talk to you about your experience with the DNC. But if you have any questions or anything at all for Marianne, the studio line is open, 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007. And, of course, you can always ask questions in the chat room as well. We have a very busy chat room. But... yeah, I saw you on the Young Turks with Cenk and Anna, and you were talking quite a bit about some of the ways that they, I don't know how much you blame the DNC or the Biden campaign or both, if it's all kind of the same, but it sounds like they've really kind of tried to sabotage you.
Yeah. Yes. Early on, after I had announced, I heard some pundits say, well, we should just pretend she's not there. And I thought, well, they're not going to be able to do that.
Right.
But that's exactly been the tactic, So I'm not on, it's pretty astonishing, actually. Someone who is a declared candidate, you're not on CNN, you're not on MSNBC. Mm-hmm. So you really see that those stations, those networks just chop wood and carry water for the DNC, for the Democrats, the way Fox does for the Republicans. And it's bad for our democracy. I'm sorry, it is. It just is. It's bad for democracy.
No, I agree with you. Obviously, in some ways, your experience has been different than in 2020, because in 2020, for example, you didn't have an incumbent Democrat, so it was an open field, and you got to be on that debate stage. You actually quite a few of the debates, right, in the 2020 cycle.
Yeah, a couple of them, and they were satisfied to just mock me,
Yeah,
and treat me like I'm wacky and woo-woo, etc. This time, they are very serious about not wanting anyone in the field except Joe Biden, and they're overt about it. I just think it's a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea not only because it's bad for democracy, but because we're all supposed to just assume that because the president beat Trump in 2020, that he's the best candidate for 2024. I think that's wrong. I don't believe that's true. I think that, when people say to me, Marianne, why are you doing this? The fascists are at the door. Don't you realize that? I'm doing this because the fascists are at the door. And I agree with Franklin Roosevelt, who said that we wouldn't have to worry about a fascist takeover as long as democracy delivered on its promises. In a country that, unlike every other advanced democracy, does not have universal health care, that does not have tuition-free college or free childcare or paid family leave or a guaranteed living wage or guaranteed housing, democracy is not delivering on its promises. And that should be the agenda of the Democrats. It is my agenda for 2024. It is an offering of fundamental economic reform. Not just the alleviation of stress for what really amounts to less than the majority of the American people. Bidenomics is not a winning message for 2024. It means that I've alleviated the stress of some people. That is not the majority of people. That message that we've done so well, and let's just finish the job, is contradictory to the visceral experience of the majority of American people. It's not going to win, and most importantly, it's not going to repair the country over the next 4 years, and my agenda does.
How does your agenda differ from what Biden has done or what he puts forth? Because obviously, Republicans talk about Biden like he's this far left guy, which
that's a joke, actually.
Clearly is not. And then, of course, on the other hand, you have folks like I mentioned, the Young Turks. They talk about Biden and other Democrats that are kind of in that lane as being sort of Republican light almost.
Well, when you ask how my agenda differs, my agenda is universal health care. He has said that he would veto a Medicare for all bill. It is a complete cancellation of the college loan debt. It is tuition-free tech school. It is paid family leave. It is a guaranteed living wage. It is all those things that I had said before. They are quite different than the president. The president is taking incremental approaches to maybe sort of kind of sometime getting there. But like all corporatist Democrats, he wants to help people, but he not so much that he is willing to get to the point of challenging the bottom line of his corporate donors, for whom short-term profits goes above and beyond and takes precedence over safety and well-being and health of the American people. So that's very different. Mine is fundamental economic reform, where humanitarian principles and democratic principles come before corporate profits. It's as simple as that. And also another way in which I radically differ from the president is that for all his talk about being a climate president, and even though there are indeed some healthy investments in green energy in the Inflation Reduction Act, he has given more oil drilling permits than even Trump did. And he's approved the Willow Project, which was an $8 billion oil drilling project on the North Slopes of Alaska, both of which completely nullify the benefits that otherwise are healthy in the Inflation Reduction Act regarding climate change. So I would declare a climate emergency, and I would begin us immediately on mass mobilization to move justly from a dirty economy to a clean economy.
Has your messaging or even the issues themselves that you're most concerned about, has that changed at all between 2020 and 2024, or is it kind of the same?
No, I look at the world the same way I did then. I have moved all the way to Medicare for all in a way that in 2020 wasn't.
So have we.
Yeah. In 2020, I still thought we could get there for everybody, and I see differently now.
Yeah.
And also, I think we ought to legalize drugs, and I wasn't there. In 2020, I really get we should end the drug war.
Yeah, I say that all the time, although I've always been there on that one, but it took me a while to get there on Medicare for all. I consider myself a capitalist, and I think Jenny would say the same thing.
I'm a recovering Republican.
Right, yeah, Jenny used to be a Republican state rep.
Long time ago, not anymore.
I'm an independent, but I've always said, my position, Marianne, has always been that, we live in the most successful, most prosperous, wealthiest country in the history of the world. So when somebody tries to tell me that we just can't figure out a way to make sure that everyone has access to adequate
exactly right.
or better than adequate, preferably healthcare, I just don't believe it. So
well, you shouldn't believe it because, of course, their ruse is to tell us that it's just complicated. It's not complicated; it's corrupt. Whether it's a matrix of corporate dominance that has become corporate tyranny at this point. Universal healthcare because of insurance companies, rationing insulin because of pharmaceutical companies, carcinogens in our food because of big food companies, big agricultural companies, big chemical companies, lack of safety on our streets because of gun manufacturers, dirty energy because of big oil, and obviously our foreign policy dominated by the military-industrial complex because of defense contractors. This will not end if we keep electing those people, because everything that I just said is now baked into the cake there. The status quo will not disrupt itself. This will only happen if there is an intervention by the people. A government of the people, by the people, and for the people has become a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. Those people will not end that. Only we can.
They absolutely will not. After just being a brief time in D.C., the amount of money that goes into the lobbying there that absolutely destroys our healthcare system, and it makes access almost impossible. I'm right there with you. I used to think that we could fix our healthcare system, and no, we can't.
85 million people are underinsured or uninsured. And this business of underinsured, there are millions of people who have the insurance that will enable them to go to the doctor, but 18 million of them can't afford, because they don't have the coverage, to pay for the prescriptions that the doctors give them. They can't afford the treatment. I've had doctors say to me, why do I even bother?
Yeah.
I tell people, I understand what's wrong with you. This is the medicine you need. This is the treatment you need. And the person says, my insurance won't cover it. So what was the point of hearing the doctor tell you what was wrong with you?
I have a provider that had to hire an employee just to deal with denials from Anthem.
Thank you.
Just to deal with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we have 1 in 4 Americans living with medical debt.
Yes.
We have $88 billion medical debt, although I read the other day, no, it's actually $200 million. So somewhere in there.
How many people are poor in our society because that's the only way they can stay alive? That's me. I pay for my medications, my infusions. I could go on and on. Everybody knows my story. But it's that bad that every day people suffer and die in this country while the medications to make their lives better or to have a dignity are locked behind a closed door in the hospital where they can't afford it.
We have 1.3 million Americans who ration their insulin.
Yes.
When I mentioned that in a speech I gave in England about 3 months ago, people looked at me in disbelief.
Yeah.
Because they have socialized medicine. They have universal health care. They can't even imagine. What do you mean people ration their insulin?
And this $35 limit, this isn't good enough. It's still for an average patient who needs 7 vials. That's over $200 in 1 month.
Right. And that's, by the way, only if you're 65 years or older. There are a lot of people under the age of 65 who are rationing their insulin.
I did not know it was only for people over 65. I thought that was a universal limit. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And what's your status in New Hampshire as far as, are you on the ballot here for the primary?
Well, I certainly will be on the ballot.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've been very upset about, and I mean, I guess I understand from a political standpoint, the rationale behind it, Biden wanting to, I think he basically told the DNC, you have to move the first in the nation primary status to South Carolina. And I get it in a sense that, you know, I always say Joe Biden owes his presidency to Congressman Jim Clyburn for that endorsement. That's what turned it all around. And you were you still in the race at that point? Were you on the ballot in South Carolina last time?
I dropped out. I dropped out before New Hampshire last time, but I regretted it actually.
Did you? Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm not dropping out this time.
I remember seeing you in the debates, and you know, they kind of had you on the side. And obviously those debates where you've got a whole, 8 or 10 people on the stage, it's not really the best format to get to know new faces on the political scene, because that was the first time we were really learning about you. It was afterward, I saw a couple of long form interviews. One was with a guy I'm not crazy about, but Dave Rubin. I watched your sit down with Dave Rubin, and I said, wow, she really knows her stuff. And it really, watching that conversation, and the way you pushed back on a lot of, it's Dave Rubin, the way you pushed back on a lot of his nonsense, frankly, I was impressed. I said, wow, Marianne Williamson, she's really, she brings a lot more to the table than what we got to see during the debates, because as you know, during the debates, when you're on the end, you know, you only get a couple of times to really speak.
Well, it was even more than that too, because there's a cognitive dissonance between what you were just saying, David Rubin interviews, and others, versus she's wacky, she's kooky, she's a crystal lady. You know, narratives are they are used as political weapons.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
And I'm sorry, but to speak freely, they like to use that kind of language when a woman is involved.
Thank you very much. If Cory Booker says that it's profound, if I say it, it's woo-woo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or emotional. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's part of what's wrong with our society. Unfortunately, but fortunately, there are a lot of women in this country who are coming back and fighting to end that.
Yeah, and at the same time, when I think of some of the weaponization of false information and so forth, certainly regarding me, it's been women as much as men.
Really? Mm-hmm. Jeez. See, I feel bad now.
We internalize a lot of misogyny, I think.
What do you mean? What do you mean? I'm curious. Can you expand on that?
I think when you talk about feminist thinking, I know men who are more feminist in their thinking, in terms of really standing up for women. When I was growing up, and the sort of feminism of the era of, let's say, the 1970s, it was very understood that sisterhood was part of this. None of us would get there unless all of us get there. It seemed to be given equal weight, not just the idea of equal rights for women, but also women being there for other women. It was understood we needed that. And these days, I think a lot of so-called feminists don't seem to have a problem trashing other women in order to get what they call their equal rights.
Point taken. Absolutely. Point taken.
I'm thinking of somebody specific. I don't know if you're familiar with her, or this might even be someone you had in mind. That I don't know her actual name, but she's on social media as Just Pearly Things.
I don't know her.
Okay, but she kind of it does what you were talking about, where she kind of trashes other women, and it's strange to watch her.
I had one question for you. Something that I know is on a lot of Manchester residents' minds is our unemployed. Forgive me. Our homeless rate has gone up 54% in a year. And this is it's not just here. This is going on everywhere. A lot to do with inaccessible homes, rents going out of control. What are you thinking in your administration you would do to help lessen the population that we have that are homeless and help get people homed?
Homelessness is a symptom. And it is a symptom of an unfair economic system. That's why my economic Bill of Rights calls for many things that actually reduce the poverty rate to begin with. We have an eviction rate with over 3 million people were evicted from their homes last year. That's as high as it was during the housing crisis. So the moratorium on evictions that was put in place during the COVID emergency, lifting that moratorium is absurd. We should realize how many people who are homeless actually work full time.
That's a lot of,
and that goes back to things like what we were talking about with the insulin. So somebody says, "What do I do? Do I try to stay alive and get my insulin, or do I pay my rent?" They miss one rent check, and then they and their family are thrown onto the streets. So it's become a cliche to say poverty is a policy choice, but in very real ways, it is. These are people who are at the effect of what is essentially an unjust economic system. So on one hand, you could say, well, there are 600,000 homeless people, and there are also 500,000 homes that could be, think of all the jobs you could create if we kind of had a Marshall Plan for housing.
Yes.
Also, we've got to stop with the commodification of housing that's now going on, the lack of adequate housing, affordable housing. All of those things that we know to be true. But I think we need more than anything to realize that it's all one problem. It's how many people in this country have been thrown away. That's what it is. Whether it's people who don't have health care, people who don't have a place to live, people who don't have an education, people who have to work 2 or 3 jobs. It's a huge swath of human suffering, which is treated like an invisible throwaway to official political Washington. And until the American people recognize that and vote for a fundamental break with that system, then even if we had 500,000 houses that were turned into places for these people to live, there would still be more coming down the pike because the system does not address the fundamental needs of the American people.
Well, I like what you brought up about, there's homeless people who have jobs, who
That's
are employed,
right.
but they're just in a situation where they can't pay rent, certainly can't afford a mortgage. I think that's an important thing to remind people about, because a phrase that gets lost in a lot of dialogue that I think people need to learn is the phrase working poor. There are people, because people, I think there's a stigma. People look at homeless people and assume they just, they're too lazy to find a job or this and that. But like you said, a lot of homeless people have jobs.
Absolutely.
But they're just underwater.
Another terrible thing going on with a lot of that. Let's say somebody misses their rent, they get evicted, they have children, they're living in their car. So then the couple is terrified that if they send their kids to school, some school official is going to realize the child is living in the car and is going to call the Child Protective Services. So the parents are terrified the child will be taken away. So the parents take the kids out of school in order to homeschool them. Well, where are they going to get Wi-Fi? Mm-hmm. So then they're going into McDonald's to get on Wi-Fi, to be able to homeschool their kids. This is the amount of this is the layers of people being beaten down in this system. And like you said, it's working poor. It's good people. It's, we all know the cliches and every group has a shadow element, but that's not who the group is. And we need to realize that about the homeless. And also all these laws all over the country where they're criminalizing feeding the homeless.
Yeah.
There was recently a case in Texas. Unfortunately, the woman was acquitted. She was arrested for her organization feeding the homeless.
Yeah.
They are arresting people for feeding the hungry.
Yep.
Yeah, that's been
Yeah,
a
I
strange
saw that. It was
trend.
horrible.
Yeah, we have a call, Marianne. If you'll take a call from a listener, our friend Shannon is on the line. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Jenny. Hi, is it Mary?
Oh,
Miriam?
Oh, Marianne can't.
Mary Ann. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, she's turning up the volume on her headphones. Actually,
I don't know.
she can't hear you. Jenny's gonna. Are those?
Jenny. Okay.
Jenny's helping her.
Okay.
Actually. Oh,
when you were
gonna
talking about,
try a different
Can you hear
pair.
Sorry.
Trying a different pair of headphones.
How about now?
Can you hear me?
A little bit better. Could you turn it up for me? Yes, I think I'll be able to if you speak.
Okay, go ahead, Shannon.
I can try just yelling.
Okay, no, we got it. Just had to try a different pair of
Thank
headphones.
you.
Okay, because I do that a lot here.
That's all right. Go ahead, Shannon.
What I was going to say is you were talking about the homeless population. What never gets mentioned is a building fire that displaces 5, 6 families.
Oh, sure.
And, they are now homeless unless they have some family or whatever,
Right.
Good point to remember.
Yeah, that's another direction to go in. But
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have a specific question for Marianne?
No, not a question, just that statement that the homeless people aren't just the working poor and this, that, and everything else. That they're human beings, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Stop treating them like they're unsightly trash.
Yes. Agreed.
That's what Marianne was
Homeless
saying.
people, pick up your trash.
Yeah.
Come on, Maddie, say agreed. Matt, sorry. And just, I went, it doesn't matter. Treat human beings.
Yep, agreed.
Like human beings.
Absolutely.
That's a cliche. Treat
Well,
people how you want to be treated.
Yeah, I think Marianne wants to respond.
Well,
go ahead.
we say homeless people, and we tend to leave out the word people.
Right, exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
there are people that don't have to happen. They don't have
exactly.
walls and halls and doors and windows.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep. No. Well said. All right, Shannon. Well, we appreciate the call.
All right.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.
Right, bye-bye.
All right, and we are taking calls. The studio line is open, 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007. Marianne Williamson is here if you're just joining us, and she is a presidential candidate running on for the Democrats to challenge President Biden. And Marianne, can I ask, it's an indelicate question, but and I don't know if this is something you've addressed. I haven't heard you address this specifically, but I mean, in terms of President Biden, do you think he's too old?
I'm running against the president on issues.
Yeah.
I hesitate to talk about his age because for a couple of reasons. First of all, it just feels personal, and everybody can see the president's age. Everybody can hear how he speaks.
Yeah.
And also, I don't want to be ageist about it. I'm 71. So I just, the American people, the American voter does not need me to tell them the president's age.
True.
They don't need me to point out his gaffes or point out any of that.
Yeah.
Today he was in Hawaii and he was telling people in Lahaina that he understands about the fire because he and Jill almost lost their Corvette and their cat when lightning struck their garage. And even though he said, I don't mean to be whatever, it was like cringe,
Yeah.
That is really cringy.
But you don't think that's somewhat a product of his, like, I don't know if Biden 10 years ago would have said that.
Well, that's kind of my point, but even though I did just point it out, everybody hears, and it is legitimate to ask ourselves what that would be in someone going on for another 4 years.
Yeah.
It is legitimate to consider his vice presidential candidate, and it's legitimate to consider whether or not he's a strong candidate. The DNC would have us believe that because he beat Trump in 2020, that it follows that he would beat him or Vivek Ramaswamy or DeSantis or anyone else in 2024. And I think the biggest point here is that it's not supposed to be the DNC's decision. Mm-hmm. It should be the people in New Hampshire, in South Carolina, in Michigan, in Nevada, in these primary states that open up this dialogue. The role of the political party has traditionally been to stay in the background until the people have spoken. And then the people will decide, and then the party's supposed to swoop in at this point and support the candidate. Today, they don't even pretend. They're very overt about it. They're not even covert. They're saying, we will support the president, and then they've concocted this narrative about how this never happens. But it happens all the time. They say, yeah, but when Teddy Kennedy ran against Carter, I'm sorry. Teddy Kennedy did not defeat Carter. Ronald Reagan did. So, and also, in 2016, there were a lot of Republican candidates, and the Republicans still won. In 2020, there were a lot of Democratic candidates, and the Democrats still won. So this suggestion that a lot of candidates will endanger us, we all have to get, every time somebody says that to me, Marianne, we all have to just line up behind Biden. There's a fascist at the door. I always think to myself, wow, I bet you have health care, don't you? I bet you can send your kids to college, don't you? I bet you live on more than $15 an hour, don't you? I bet you can afford to live on just one job, can't you? This is, there is in sociology, they talk about the difference between a screaming emergency and a silent emergency. COVID was a screaming emergency. We all got that it was an emergency, but why was it given this official moniker of emergency? Because rich people got it too. So when the COVID emergency, when the president declared it over, sending millions of people off their SNAP benefits, millions of people off Medicaid, he said the emergency is over, go back to your lives. For millions of people, life was already an emergency. Homelessness is an emergency. Poverty is an emergency. Hunger is an emergency. Lack of health care is an emergency. Medical debt is an emergency. So there are the majority, and remember, we're talking here about the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
And it's not only the poor and the near poor, it's the afraid of becoming poor. It's the living with the constant economic stress of what will happen if I lose my job.
Right.
It's
well, and healthcare is tied. We have a system in this country where healthcare is directly tied to your job in most cases.
And this is why so many people are working at jobs they hate. And then we talk about the mental health crisis as though that is separate from these things, as though economic anxiety and stress is not a primary, if not the primary source of the fact that people just can't take it. And then when we, they talk about intersectionality, and then that is related to the drug crisis and so forth. People are falling apart in front of our eyes, and we're supposed to go have another Biden-Trump election where the fact that people are falling apart in front of our eyes will politely be left out of the conversation.
The rematch nobody wants, but
well said.
They're certain to give it to us. That's for sure. Yeah, when you were talking too about challenging incumbents, I was thinking about you mentioned like Teddy Kennedy challenging Jimmy Carter and so forth. I was thinking about 1992 when right here in New Hampshire, Pat Buchanan damn near beat. In fact, I think it was a statistical tie. Damn near beat George H.W. Bush in the New Hampshire primary.
It's called democracy. There were actual elections, and you didn't know who was going to win, and you didn't have a sense of a political party putting their finger on the scale.
Yeah.
And for Democrats, this has been going on 2016 with Bernie, 2020 with Bernie. And what I'm seeing, we've got to stand up to this.
Yeah, I remember in 2016. The way the DNC, really kind of did put their thumb on the scale for Hillary. And in fact, in ways, we talked about debates. I remember they were, Debbie Wasserman Schultz made sure, this doesn't get pointed out very often, but she made sure that the debates were scheduled on Friday and Saturday nights when young people
would not be watching.
Sure. But that's who Bernie appealed to, was young people.
Well, in the New York Times poll that came out a week before last, in the tab that is people 18 to 29, Biden has 34%. I have 27%.
No kidding.
And Bobby Kennedy has 13%. Now, it's also interesting. Why is that? Well, on one hand, it's policies, obviously, but there's something else. I can reach them because they're on TikTok, and it doesn't cost me money to get on TikTok. So they know what they're doing by blocking me on CNN. They know what they're doing blocking me on MSNBC. They know what they're doing calling me long shot, not a credible candidate, because it's their way of saying nothing to look at there, folks. Yep. Nothing to see there, folks. Just walk on by, nothing to see there. We've already got our candidate.
Right, but it does give you more time to, to go on. I mean, a lot of the shows, as you pointed out, they've got a younger audience. So it allows you to connect with those people. I mean, maybe you're better off, going on podcasts and radio shows that a younger audience is paying attention to than going on establishment media,
Well, you need both to reach. I mean, all Americans of every age matter.
Yeah.
And certainly the youth vote is extremely important. And it's important not only demographically in electoral sense, it's important morally. They're going to be here for another 40 or 50 years.
Right.
They deserve their voice. They're talking about their lives. Why are old people who probably will not be here in 20 years, how do they think they have the right to make all these decisions that will affect the lives of people who have another 40, 50, 60 years ahead of them? So a presidential candidate or any political candidate needs to try to reach all. And every voter. I mean, there's no voter that doesn't count. I'm grateful to be on your show. You're grateful to be on independent media, and you need to have any opportunity you have to reach people.
Have you been able to penetrate that at all with like cable news? Has CNN had you on at all?
Well, Fox wants to have me on because they don't have a problem messing with the president.
Right,
so
right.
I get invited on Fox, and I've been on News Nation a little bit, and but CNN and MSNBC. Even the people who had me last time quite a bit. And I just, I don't want to sound victim-y or whiny or any of that because, that's not what this is about. It's just wrong.
So do you go on when Fox invites you?
Yes, because it's the only way you can reach people. And I remind you that you're in New Hampshire where there's an open primary.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are watching Fox in New Hampshire. So yes, I go on. I mean, there's one show that I turned down this week that's not on Fox. It's another station.
Yeah.
But it was so obvious that it was only to screw the president. And,
right.
And I'm not doing that. I'm not going to play that game. I'm not going to be used that way.
Yeah.
But on Fox, absolutely. News Nation.
Well, that's why they love to have RFK on. Like conservative media has really embraced him. I mean, part of it is some of the things he says, obviously, but also too, yeah.
But once again, when you look at him, New Hampshire is an open primary. South Carolina is an open primary too. So, this is a very anybody who thinks that this is a predictable era and that what lies before us politically is predictable, I think is naive. There is a lot of energy rumbling up from the bottom of things. I think there's a profound political realignment going on in this country. And I don't think either major political party has any clue because they're in their own bubble of their own multi-billion-dollar corporate. Really, that's what they are.
Yeah.
And things will not remain the way they are. Things are going to break. They're either going to break in the direction of greater democracy and justice, and people who say, wait, we're going back to of the people, by the people, for the people, as opposed to of the corporations, by the corporations, for the corporations, or it's going to break in the direction of dystopia and neo-authoritarianism and some really horrifying prospects if we're not careful.
Is there an issue that you have been talking about that has been a kind of one of your main issues in your campaign that you feel is not getting talked about enough, that's kind of being ignored by the mainstream? Is there anything that you've been really...
the mainstream is ignoring me anyway. So, of course, everything I talk about is being ignored by the mainstream.
Sure.
But I think there are some things that I wish to emphasize. One thing, for instance, I want a Department of Children and Youth. We need to do a massive movement of resources in the direction of children 10 years and younger. I don't think that we are beginning to grapple with what it means that we are now raising a generation of young children praying every morning they will not get shot at school. So you think we have a mental health crisis now. You just wait 10 or 15 years. If we want a thriving economy and a thriving society 10, 15, 20 years from now, our job is to take much better care of our children 10 years old and younger today. Everybody talks about trauma-informed education. We need to ask ourselves, why do we need? Something is very wrong in a society that needs so much, quote-unquote, trauma-informed education. I have met elementary school principals who say they have elementary school students on suicide watch. We have children in this country who are traumatized before kindergarten. So I want to be the children's president. And I want every public school in America to be a palace of culture and learning and the arts. So that is an emphasis. Also, I want a Department of Peace, and I want this profound economic U-turn. And I think that ending the drug war is important as well. So, yeah, I have some things to say that are quite different than both Biden and Bobby.
What about, I want to ask you about immigration, too. And obviously, I know you're originally from Texas.
Yes.
And sometimes people in border states have a little bit of a different perspective than we do, say, here in the Northeast. So I'm curious to ask you about your immigration policy and what, my position. We talk about it a lot on the show. I feel that we need a massive overhaul of the entire immigration system.
Of course we do. And much of the problem is due to congressional inaction over the last few decades. But also a lot of the problem has to do with American foreign policy in Latin America over the last few decades. And that includes not only supporting people who were the bad guys, to be quite honest, because we thought the good guys were communists or socialists. And in fact, in many cases, the people that we did not support are the ones who would have promoted a more stable economy. Secondly, and this goes back to what we were talking about, the drug war. The horror that most of the people from Latin America are seeking to escape has to do with the drug cartels.
Oh, yeah.
Ending the drug war will not solve the problem completely, but it will help. In the meantime, when you talk about the crisis at the border, a lot of it, when certain voices in our society talk about the crisis at the border, they're talking about a different crisis than the one that matters to me. And the one they're talking about is not even a crisis, actually, given how many jobs are open and available that native-born Americans are not looking to fill, thank you very much, that many of these immigrants are. That's number one. And number two, we need to own, on an emotional level, the humanitarian crisis. If the average American had any idea what some of these people, most of these people, actually, are seeking to escape. Now, are there people trying to game the asylum system? Yeah, there actually are.
Of course,
and
yeah.
we should not allow that to happen. But for the most part, if we're going to just shut not just our borders but our hearts, then let's take down that Emma Lazarus poem. Let's just not pretend. Let's just not be these hypocrites. Give me your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, because we don't even mean it anymore. So we've got to decide: are we a compassionate society or not? The idea that we don't have, quote unquote, won't have room for these people, actually we do. And if you look at the statistics, the immigrant population does more to contribute to our economy, not just to our culture and to our society, which should be obvious to anyone, to our economy. And most of these undocumented people, they don't want to be undocumented. We force people into the shadows. We have draconian immigration laws. And so absolutely, this needs to be overhaul. But I'll tell you something. I think if there's any common thread to my candidacy and would be to my administration is do right by people and everything's going to repair itself.
Yeah.
Just do right by people and gradually things are going to right. The ship is listing so far to one side. And what those voices of the political class would say is that these ideas are so far left or so radical. I remind you, they're considered moderate positions in every other advanced democracy. But more than that, what's radical is what the neoliberal vulture capitalist system has done. That is what's radical. What's radical is that over the last 50 years, there has been a $50 trillion transfer of wealth into the hands of 1% of Americans. That's what's radical. What's radical is that 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt in the richest country in the world, that 68,000 people a year die of lack of health care, that 1/3 of Americans live on less than $15 an hour and half of them cannot find a place to live, that half of our seniors live on less than $25,000 a year. That is what's radical. So what I'm saying is just bring the ship back to a semblance of a situation in which everyone has a chance. That's the American dream, that people have a chance, that if they work hard enough, they can manifest and make their dreams come true. It used to be that the American dream was to buy a house. Today, the American dream for millions of people is to get out of debt before they die.
Yeah.
Debt is crippling. And these loans that these kids are carrying, I can't even imagine being in my 20s. I don't know if I've been in my 20s with tens of thousands of dollars of college loan debt, which they only took out because they're trying to better their lives.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
so wrong. And that's why these loans should be forgiven, because they should never have existed to begin with.
Well, Biden did try to do that, and then it got...
There are those who believe if he had just come in and canceled the whole thing, and he still has ways that he could do more.
Yeah, I don't know.
He tries to have it both ways. He wants to help people, but he doesn't want to offend, the bankers. He doesn't want to offend those corporate donors. And so far, it's the American people should have a chance to decide whether or not that is an adequate response to the challenges of our time.
Well, he's been a product of Washington going back 50 years of
And
Washington, D.C.
Including he was arguing, he was the one who helped push the bill, which said that you could not go bankrupt and get out of your college loan debt.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And the crime bill.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like on some of these issues, like immigration, to me, is because, as you said, that's been a problem for decades, and we can't seem to get, we'll get a little bit of action on it here and there, but I feel like the ball, it doesn't really get moved down the field much in either direction over the decades. And I feel like part of what I feel is broken about our politics is there's money in solving problems, but there's also money in not solving problems. Meaning, for example, if immigration never gets solved in any meaningful way, both Democrats and Republicans can continue to raise money off of the issue. So even if you don't solve the problem, there's still money in it for you. I mean, our two-party political system, it's like, it's like failing up. You can fail at solving problems, but if you talk about solving them or look like you're trying to solve them, that's good enough, and people will give you money.
Well, look at what happened with Roe v. Wade. I mean, it should have been codified by the Democrats years ago. It should have been codified under Obama, who said he wanted to do that when he was a candidate, but then said he didn't want to spend his political capital on that. And it should have been codified the first 2 years at the beginning of the Biden presidency. But much as you were saying, there was so much money raised on, vote for us, or we could lose Roe v. Wade. Well, guess what? We did vote for you, and we did lose Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, I said the same thing with the debt ceiling when we went through that last round and Marianne, I can tell you, Jenny knows, I was pessimistic, and I try to be an optimist on the show. I really thought we might go over the fiscal cliff. I really thought this might be it. And of course it wasn't, thank goodness. But I said the same thing you were saying about Roe v. Wade. When the Democrats had control, they should have finally done away with the debt ceiling.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's totally ridiculous. Well, also, I think the president shouldn't have even negotiated. He should have just, what is it, the 14th Amendment? I can't remember. No, that couldn't be the 14th.
No, it is. Yeah, that's in the 14th Amendment. Well, that would have been, see, I disagree with you there. I think that would have been that would have been scary. We would have been in uncharted water there.
Well, why though? All
it would have taken is some judge to put an injunction on him. I mean, we don't even know how exactly it would have been invoked, how it would have been implemented. I think that would have been very dangerous.
I think the Democrats blink too much.
I think there's, I do somewhat agree with you on that point, because I think, I hear Cenk Uygur say it all the time, Republicans can be ruthless, but Democrats tend to want to just play nice. And
that's right.
And
I agree with Cenk on that.
Yeah,
the Republicans consider the fact that they won the election their mandate. And as we're well aware, they have no problem overreaching and abusing power. But Democrats won't even use the power that they're given.
Yeah.
Right? Well, we didn't get a mandate. We'll have to wait till the second term. And then things don't change in the second term. Well, it's really important that we win again so that maybe we can, this is the milquetoast. And I think people don't like that. People like to see spine in their leaders. We need a mother in the White House. You can take that however you want, though.
I remember after Roe v. Wade was overturned and seeing Kamala Harris, I think it was Dana Bash on CNN interviewing her. And yeah, she kind of had that thing that you were just doing where she's like, yeah, well, what can you do? You got to vote for more of us.
You got to vote for more Democrats, man.
Yeah,
That'll fix it.
Yeah.
And I'm running as a Democrat. I do want you to vote for more Democrats, but they're different. They're Democrats, and then there are Democrats. And much as you were saying earlier, the corporatist Democrats today are what Republicans were when I was growing up.
Well, it's like I remember Paul Wellstone,
he said, "I'm from the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party."
Yep,
exactly.
Yep.
Exactly my point. That I I would see myself as a Paul Wellstone Democrat.
I'm curious too. Have you been courted by any third parties who have come to you and said?
Years ago, I was. Years ago, the Green Party had asked me to.
Okay.
But not. No, I feel I'm nostalgic for the Democratic Party of my youth. I'm nostalgic historically for the Democratic Party of Franklin Roosevelt. I don't. I'm aware that third-party voices have been very important in the United States. Abolition came from the Abolitionist Party. Women's suffrage came from the Women's Party. Social Security came from the Socialist Party. And I'm not pleased, nor should any American be pleased, with the way Democratic and Republican parties have formed this unholy alliance, making it very difficult for third parties to have the significant voice.
Yeah.
Having said that, I also think that the soul of the Democratic and the Republican Party need to be retrieved for the sake of this country. I think a lot of people, understandably, criticizing the corporate duopoly, which I certainly agree with, but let's not be naive about third parties too, because the problem is with political parties, period. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And any system can be corrupted.
Yeah. No labels seems, well, there's a lot of suspicions about what they're really up to. Have they approached you or probably not?
No.
Yeah.
I don't think they would want me in there. They want a Democrat and a Republican, but from the corporate duopolistic
right. Yes.
worldview. Yeah.
They certainly do.
That world where it seems like they're different, but they're really not so much, or certainly not when it comes to big oil or defense contractors. They all, fall in line for the same guys.
We have just a quick question in the chat room, and then we know you got to go. But Tom Blanchard is asking, what do you think about taxing business? One president raised taxes on business, and a lot of them left the country.
That's just nonsense, because when you look back at the 1950s and 60s and even 70s, when we had these very high tax rates for these companies, they were here.
Yeah.
They were here. So I think that that's the threat. Oh, they'll leave. Well, look how many are leaving now.
Right.
The ones who are going to leave, they're leaving now. So I do not. What is it we're supposed to be afraid of? If we tax them more and we have more money to take care of people, then in that point, let them leave if they want to leave. But the evidence is not that they would, and the evidence is that we should be afraid of how many of them are leaving right now, because we are actually making it easier for them in many cases because of these trade deals to leave.
Well, on that note, it is almost the top of the hour. Marianne Williamson, thank you so much. It's wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
I hope we can do this again in the future. I assume you're spending a lot of time in our state. So.
I am, and I hope that people will go to Marianne2024.com and sign up so that I can let you know when I'm back. I would be very grateful for that.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna play a song here and for the crossover, and then. Oh, here we go. And then we'll let you scoot. All right. Marianne, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
They say don't throw stones if you live in a glass home, but America is Ritten's house. Time we took a Ritten's house and rebuilt from the bone. The structure's irredeemable.